Brothers and sisters watching today, let me start with a simple but powerful question. Did Interpol truly issue an arrest warrant for Ibrahim Traoré, the young captain who now leads Burkina Faso? In recent weeks, videos have spread across the internet, many of them filled with fiery speeches claiming that the West is hunting him down. For millions of viewers, those words stir deep emotions. But before we accept them, we need to pause. What is fact and what is rumor? What is law and what is politics? To understand this story, let us first slow down the noise. Imagine an older man in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. He runs a small shop selling bread and tea. His shelves are thin because supplies are scarce. His customers whisper about insecurity outside the city, where villages face attacks from armed groups. For him, the news of an international warrant is not about speeches or politics. It is about fear. Fear that his country may fall deeper into isolation, that prices will rise, and that his children may have no safe future. This is the human face of the headlines. For older Americans watching, the story may seem distant, but it connects directly to values that matter everywhere: justice, security, dignity, and truth. Interpol, the international police organization, was created to support cooperation against serious crimes: drug trafficking, terrorism, organized crime. Its role, at least on paper, is neutral. But when someone says Interpol has been weaponized for politics, alarm bells ring. If truth, it would mean justice itself is at risk. If false, it could mean that leaders are using rumors to strengthen their grip on power. Both possibilities matter not only for Africa, but for the United States and the wider world. And so we must ask, where is the truth? Has Interpol really issued such a notice? And if not, why are these claims spreading so fast? In a world flooded with videos and strong speeches, how do we separate fact from fiction? This is the journey we will take together in the minutes ahead. Step by step, calmly, carefully, with respect for the people at the center of the storm. Because, as you will see, sometimes a single rumor can tell us more about power and fear than the documents that never existed. To begin, let us place the rumor side by side with the facts. In the viral speech circulating online, we hear powerful words. Interpol may issue whatever warrant it wishes, but Africa will not bow. It sounds dramatic, almost cinematic. It paints a picture of a lone soldier defying the combined weight of Paris, Washington, and Brussels. For many viewers, it feels true because it connects to a long history of injustice. But here's the key. No public record shows that Interpol has issued such a notice against Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Interpol works through what is called a red notice. It is important to slow down and define it clearly. A red notice is not an arrest warrant. It is a request shared among member countries, asking police worldwide to locate and provisionally arrest a person. But there are rules. A red notice must be based on a valid domestic arrest warrant from a court. And according to Interpol's own constitution, Article 3, the organization is forbidden from taking up cases that are political, military, racial, or religious in nature. This safeguard was written precisely to prevent the organization from becoming a political weapon. If such a red notice existed, it would likely appear in Interpol's public database of wanted persons. As of late August 2025, no such record includes Ibrahim Traoré. Independent journalists and researchers who monitor Interpol have also found nothing. This does not mean a notice could never exist secretly, since not all are public. But it does mean the sweeping claims in those viral videos have no concrete evidence. That is an essential fact to keep in mind. Why then does the rumor travel so far? Because in today's media world, outrage spreads faster than documents. A fiery speech can leap across Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp in hours, reaching millions who never check official websites. A database entry on Interpol's page may be dull, but a clip of a young African captain shouting at France and America carries fire. It is a clash between emotion and evidence. Let us consider a story to bring this down to earth. Picture a young woman named Mariam in Kaya, a town in northern Burkina Faso. Her husband works in small-scale gold mining, a dangerous job where men risk their lives underground for a few grams of gold. The gold is bought cheaply by traders, many linked to smuggling networks, and resold abroad for far higher prices. Mariam knows the system is unfair, so when she hears Traoré's speeches about reclaiming Africa's minerals, she feels a spark of pride. She may not know what Interpol is. She may not check legal databases, but she recognizes the feeling of being cheated, and she sees in him a leader who dares to say, enough. For her, the rumor of a Western arrest warrant, even if untrue, confirms her suspicion that powerful outsiders want to keep Africa weak. This is why the narrative resonates. It is not just about law. It is about dignity. It taps into wounds left by centuries of slavery, colonization, and unequal trade. For many, it does not matter whether Interpol truly issued a notice. The very idea seems believable because of lived experience. Still, for Americans watching today, the distinction matters. If we accept claims without proof, we risk building opinions on sand. We must ask, what crime exactly would justify such a warrant? No court in Burkina Faso has charged Traoré with corruption or crimes under ordinary law. Instead, the controversies around him are political: a military coup, suspension of democratic institutions, and a fierce break with France. Those may be debated on the world stage, but by Interpol's own rules, they do not form the basis for a red notice. This leaves us with two truths to hold together. First, the specific claim of an Interpol warrant is unsupported. Second, the deeper story of anger, of mistrust, of people feeling silenced remains real, even without documents. Rumor, in this sense, becomes a mirror reflecting fears and frustrations, even as it departs from fact. But here lies the danger: when rumors outpace facts, they can shape politics, stir anger, and even rewrite history. So what happens to a fragile country like Burkina Faso when narratives of persecution collide with real struggles for survival? That is where we turn next. The turning point of this story comes in the words themselves. Not me, not a single African will bow. With this defiant phrase, Ibrahim Traoré's message rises from rumor to symbol. For supporters, it is not about the technical details of Interpol. It is about standing tall in a world that often feels tilted against them. This is the climax, the moment when a leader declares that even the threat of prison, exile, or death cannot silence his voice. Inside Burkina Faso, such words echo loudly. In Ouagadougou's main square, young men wave flags, some painted with the national colors, others showing slogans against France. Cell phones rise in the air to record chants. To them, Traoré is not just a captain. He is the embodiment of youth defiance. Burkina Faso's median age is under 18, and many of these young people see no future in school or jobs. When they hear, "We will not sell our dignity," they feel spoken for. Among farmers in the countryside, the reaction is more mixed. A cotton grower in Bobo-Dioulasso may agree with the message of sovereignty, but quietly ask, will this change bring fertilizer? Will it bring security against armed groups that attack villages at night? His daily life is measured not in speeches, but in whether he can plant, harvest, and keep his children safe. For him, the words are powerful, but the results remain uncertain. In the barracks, soldiers listen carefully. Many feel proud that their captain speaks with fire. Yet they also know the price. Fighting insurgents across the Sahel has cost thousands of lives. Every escalation with foreign partners risks fewer resources, less intelligence sharing, and more strain on their fragile force. Some wonder silently if defiance may inspire the people, but weaken the army's capacity in the field. Beyond Burkina Faso, the reactions ripple. In Mali and Niger, where juntas have also taken power and pushed out French troops, the speeches are welcomed as part of a new alliance of resistance. In Ghana, Senegal, and Côte d'Ivoire, countries still tied to Western cooperation, the response is more cautious. Leaders avoid endorsing Traoré's words directly, but watch nervously as anti-French sentiment grows across borders. Internationally, the picture is complicated. In Paris, Emmanuel Macron faces protests from African diaspora communities who repeat the phrase, "Africa will not bow." In Washington, policymakers debate how to respond. Should the United States increase sanctions, or should it avoid pushing Burkina Faso further into alliances with Russia or other powers? The European Union issues statements about the importance of rule of law, but avoids confirming any Interpol role. And Interpol itself remains silent, consistent with its policy of not commenting on specific cases publicly. For ordinary Americans, the drama appears in headlines. Burkina Faso leader defies the West. The details of Interpol procedure are lost, but the image of confrontation remains vivid. Older viewers may remember Cold War speeches when leaders on both sides declared they would never bend. The cadence feels familiar, almost historical. Yet here the stage is not Moscow or Washington, but Ouagadougou. The visual power of this climax cannot be ignored. Imagine a dusty rally ground with soldiers in fatigues standing beside farmers in worn sandals. Imagine painted signs demanding that gold stay in Africa, that uranium power African homes instead of European reactors. Imagine cell phones glowing at night as young people replay the speech again and again, feeling that history is unfolding in their hands. But there is also a shadow. The louder the rhetoric grows, the more vulnerable ordinary people may become. If Western partners reduce aid, if sanctions expand, if investors withdraw, it is not the captain in uniform who suffers first. It is Mariam and Kaya, whose husband mines for gold but sees little benefit. It is the shopkeeper in Ouagadougou whose shelves grow emptier as imports shrink. It is the displaced family in the Sahel, already living in a tent, who hears that humanitarian aid may be cut. This is why the climax is more than theater. It sets the stage for real consequences. Words spoken into a microphone can inspire, but they can also isolate. And when isolation comes, it does not fall evenly. Leaders may wear defiance as a badge of honor, but the people carry the heavier load. And so we ask, what happens when the fire of resistance collides with the everyday needs of food, jobs, and safety? That is the civil and political impact we must now explore. When speeches rise, the real test always arrives in the homes of ordinary people. Burkina Faso today is a country under enormous strain. Since 2015, armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS have spread violence across the countryside. More than 2 million people have been displaced inside the country. making it one of the world's fastest-growing humanitarian crises. Families walk for days to reach safer towns, carrying only what they can hold. For them, the fight is not about Interpol or international law. It is about whether they will eat tomorrow, whether their children will be able to attend school, whether their village will still stand when the sun rises. In the capital, the political impact is layered. On one hand, Traoré's defiance against the West strengthens his domestic legitimacy. Many Burkinabe, weary of foreign military bases and suspicious of international institutions, see him as the first leader in decades to speak with uncompromising pride. On the other hand, this posture risks cutting off vital support. International aid agencies provide food assistance, medical supplies, and schooling for displaced families. If relations with Western donors deteriorate further, those lifelines may weaken. The result would be felt most sharply by the poor, not by generals. Consider the economy. Gold accounts for roughly three-quarters of Burkina Faso's export earnings. Yet much of it leaves the country through unrecorded channels. Smuggling networks move tons of gold across borders, often ending up in global markets without benefiting the national budget. Traoré's speeches about keeping Africa's resources for Africa resonate because the injustice is visible. Still, breaking the cycle requires strong institutions, effective regulation, and international cooperation, tools that isolation makes harder to reach. In rural areas, political uncertainty adds to hardship. A farmer in the north may listen to the captain's words on a battery-powered radio and feel pride, but he also wonders if fertilizer subsidies will arrive. If sanctions reduce state revenue, those subsidies may disappear. For him, sovereignty is not an abstract principle. It is the difference between planting or not planting, between feeding his family or going hungry. Politically, the military government faces a paradox. By speaking against Interpol and Western powers, it mobilizes nationalist energy. But governance is not only about speeches. It is about security operations, distribution of aid, building of schools, payment of salaries. Every month of heightened tension increases the risk that promises of sovereignty will outpace delivery of services. If living conditions worsen, the same youth who cheer in the square may grow restless. History shows that legitimacy built on defiance must eventually be matched with results. The civil society space is also affected. Journalists, religious leaders, and community organizers live in a climate of heightened pressure. Some welcome the new nationalist narrative. Others worry that dissent may be branded as betrayal. For older Americans watching, this dynamic may feel familiar. Moments in history when leaders gained power through defiance abroad, but tightened control at home. The question is whether such a path leads to lasting independence or deeper cycles of conflict. Humanitarian agencies have already sounded alarms. According to the United Nations, nearly half of Burkina Faso's population needs some form of assistance. Schools have closed in conflict zones, leaving hundreds of thousands of children out of class. In refugee camps, mothers trade bread for soap or send children to bed hungry. When leaders and foreign powers clash, these families are the silent frontline. They may never hear of Interpol's red notice policies, but they live the consequences of broken partnerships. Here is a small story that captures this reality. A displaced teacher named Umar fled with his family after his village was attacked. In the camp, he still gathers children under a tree to teach them the alphabet, using sticks and the dirt as his chalkboard. When asked what he thinks about the political speeches, he shakes his head. "All I want," he says, "is for these children to have a chance at life." His voice is quiet, but it speaks volumes about the gap between fiery rhetoric and daily struggle. And yet for many citizens, the speeches do more than stir anger. They provide hope. They promise a future where Africa controls its wealth, where dignity is restored. This dual reality, hope mixed with hardship, is the heart of Burkina Faso's current moment. It is both inspiring and fragile, both a dream and a danger. The question now is how the outside world, especially the United States, views this tension. Will Washington see Traoré's defiance as a threat to security, or as a call for a new kind of partnership? That is the lens we turn to next. From Washington's perspective, Burkina Faso sits at the crossroads of two urgent concerns: counterterrorism and democracy. U.S. officials worry about the rapid advance of armed groups across the Sahel. The fall of towns, the spread of displacement, and the risk of extremist safe havens create pressure for American security planners. At the same time, the United States has long promoted democratic governance in Africa. A military leader who seizes power and then rejects Western partners presents a dilemma. To isolate him may push Burkina Faso closer to Russia or other rivals. To engage with him risks appearing to legitimize coups. France faces its own crisis of influence. Once the dominant power in West Africa, Paris has been asked to withdraw its troops from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Each withdrawal is more than a military setback. It is a symbolic rejection of decades of French presence. When Traoré declares that France's arrogance has expired, the words cut deeply into Paris's pride. French leaders now face domestic debate. How to maintain economic and cultural ties in a region that increasingly views them with suspicion. The European Union views the matter through several lenses. Security is one. Fear of uncontrolled migration routes if the Sahel collapses further. Resources are another. Uranium from Niger, gold from Burkina Faso, oil and gas from neighbors. Brussels seeks stability but knows that legitimacy in African eyes is fragile. Heavy-handed moves could backfire, feeding the very narratives of exploitation they hope to avoid. Elsewhere, leaders in the global south watch with interest. Some see Traoré's defiance as part of a larger shift toward multipolarity, where African nations assert independence from Western structures. In Moscow, Beijing, and Ankara, policymakers quietly welcome the distancing from Washington and Paris, even if they do not say so publicly. For older Americans listening, the stakes are not abstract. Instability in the Sahel can mean new safe havens for terrorism, higher costs for global commodities, and more pressure on international aid budgets. But it also raises a deeper question. How should the United States respond when leaders frame defiance not as crime, but as sovereignty? That brings us to our final step, looking ahead. What risks, what opportunities, and what choices lie before Burkina Faso, Africa, and the wider world in the months to come? As we reach the end of this journey, let us return to the central question. Did Interpol issue an arrest warrant for Ibrahim Traoré? The answer, based on all available public records, is no. There is no evidence of a red notice with his name. Yet the rumor itself tells us something vital. It shows how quickly narratives of injustice can spread. It reflects centuries of frustration, of resources taken and dignity denied. And it reveals the hunger for leaders who speak boldly, even if their words run ahead of the facts. For Burkina Faso, the coming months will be critical. One possible path is further isolation. If defiant rhetoric continues without practical reforms, aid could shrink, foreign investors could hesitate, and ordinary families could pay the price. Another path is cautious recalibration, using the energy of sovereignty not just to reject outsiders, but to build stronger institutions, regulate resources more fairly, and restore trust between government and people. For the United States and its partners, the question is equally sharp. Will they double down on pressure, risking that Burkina Faso falls into the arms of rival powers? Or will they find new ways to engage, respecting calls for dignity while still insisting on accountability and stability? Imagine 3 months from now. Perhaps a new gold deal is signed with a non-Western partner. Perhaps aid convoys slow as tensions rise. Perhaps peace talks stall because international trust erodes. Or perhaps against the odds, Burkinabe leaders and global partners find a middle ground that honors sovereignty while addressing urgent needs. Each outcome is possible. Each will shape the lives of millions. For older viewers in America, the lesson is broader. In a world of fast-spreading videos, not every speech is fact, but every speech carries weight. Words can mobilize pride, but they can also mislead. Our responsibility across continents is to ask calmly, what is true? What is rumor? And who pays the price if we get it wrong? And so I leave you with this thought. The future of Burkina Faso and of Africa more widely will not be decided by papers signed in Paris or notices filed in Lyon. It will be decided by the courage of its people, the choices of its leaders, and the willingness of the world to listen with respect. The rumor of a warrant may fade, but the deeper struggle for justice, for dignity, for sovereignty remains. Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso, Africa News. These are not just headlines. They are reminders of a continent rising and of a question we all must ask. How do we honor truth while respecting the dreams of a people who refuse to bow?